Let me know when you're ready. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. Um, This is the General Plan Advisory Committee meeting number 3, part 2. We'll begin with welcoming everyone here. And how many, I guess we'll do the roll call, if you could help me with that and find out which of our members are online instead of here in the room.
Thank you. Our resource planner, Michelle Iris, is taking Ruby's place today, or Shannon's place.
Thank you, Michelle.
She'll do the roll call.
Yes, this is working, correct. All right, Paul Duncan. I see him online.
I'm here.
Kyle Bill. Don't see him online. Double check.
Is
All
Kyle
right.
here?
Kyle Bill?
Kyle Bill?
You missed the last one, too. But
I don't
sometimes
see
he
him.
shows up a little late. Oh, that's right. You're right.
Okay, Philip Hartley. Marty Arenberg. Here. Benjamin Murphy. No. I do not see line. All right, Donna Makowitz. Saw her upstairs.
Donna, how about Donna?
Donna Makowitz. I do not see her online. Okay. Betsy Kahn.
Really?
Where are they?
Not yet anyway.
Do we have a quorum?
Yeah, let's get a total number and check quorum.
Okay. Seifert Weston.
Here.
Sharon Zoller. Carolyn Hillman. Let's see. Do not see Carolyn online. Daniel Tyrell. Vaughn Williams. Denise Rushing.
Here.
Margot Kambara. And April Lieferman.
Okay.
Yes, she's on the GPAC.
Can we hear Carolyn?
Hello, Carolyn
Hi.
Hillman.
Great.
Thank you. So we have 8 in person and 2 online is what I'm counting.
Great. 10?
Let's just make sure we get everybody online give them all the ability to speak.
And we are recording, right?
Are we?
I don't like it when Sam says that. I emailed Donna and Betsy. Make sure they weren't having access challenges.
Okay.
Ah, Terry.
Chris, could you unmute your microphone so we could hear you?
I'm sorry, you talking to me?
Yes, okay, great. Just wanted to make sure we could hear you.
Oh, great, thanks.
Hey, Sam. Terry just emailed that using the link that she just got sent on February 5th for this meeting, she's getting a Zoom message that says the host has another meeting in progress. Okay.
Okay, so we have a,
Okay. Let's just take a 3-minute break, please.
so we're going to take a 3-minute break and get the tech issues sorted.
Maria, I had that same issue, and it was with the app with the Zoom app on my computer. But then I went through the web and it joined.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, we should have, Betsy should be here, Holly should be here.
Ooh, Holly's not here either? Yeah, okay. Maybe a 4-minute break.
Okay, Sam, let's get going. All right, so we're going to get started again and just double check on the roll call. We have a couple members that have joined us virtually. Let's make sure we can hear them. One would be Donna. Make sure she can unmute and speak.
This is Donna. Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Donna. Anybody else join us that hasn't already said they're here, that's on the committee? Okay, so we'll move into agenda review. Mireya, could you go take us through the agenda? And also please note, and we don't have Betsy here online, but she had an item that she had hoped to have conversation. Just let us know when that would be. Oh, good.
Okay.
Let's
So today's agenda will cover, I think there was one request from last meeting for staff to review or to get you an answer on. We're going to cover that. But first, at the request of GPAC from our last meeting, we'll start with a presentation about the Housing Action and Implementation Plan and allow for any questions and answers that the GPAC may have.
Great. And just to double check, I noticed Betsy joined. Maybe, Betsy, could you just let us know that you can hear us and that we can hear you?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much.
Super.
Excuse me, but I didn't understand. I thought you asked for an agenda review, and Maria said we're going to do this other thing first.
No, what we asked, you had an item that you wanted added to the, or discussed as part of the agenda, and we have a spot in the agenda for that.
Great. Okay.
Not on
Just let
today's
me know
agenda,
then.
but
Thank
I'll
you.
speak to it.
Yeah, so Maria will speak to that. Okay, Maria,
Okay.
turn it over to you.
So after the HAPE, the Housing Action and Implementation Update, will cover the request from the last meeting regarding water capacity in Lower Lake. Then we will move on to a presentation of the requested community growth boundary changes and allow for some question and answers on that one. Then we'll move on to recommended planning area boundary amendments with 5 minutes or question and answers on that.
Right, and these are all informational so far.
Exactly.
Okay.
These are only informational only, as we kind of figured out through our last meeting. And then the meat of the meeting will then be a discussion with the GPAC regarding any countywide recommendations they may have for the board to consider, as they are also considering the LAPAC recommendations. It would be helpful, we did insert the question because as a countywide sort of overview, it would be helpful if there are any sort of other priorities or recommendations from the GPAC that have to do with the hazard layers, like the wildfire and the floods. So anything, if you're thinking through that filter, those type of questions will also be very helpful, or recommendations.
Mireya, in preparing the agenda, we also talked about that particular item will be on all future agendas as well, right? Where the
Indeed, the GPAC, through its discussions at the last meeting, was to take more of a countywide or holistic view as far as its recommendations to go on to the Board of Supervisors. And so we'll make sure that that level, like a countywide recommendation, is a standing item from the GPAC.
Thank you.
We will then talk about next steps, and we'll finish up our meeting. Just to bring the GPAC up to speed, Betsy presented proposed policy updates, objectives, goals, and implementations specific to senior-related services. This meeting series for the GPAC is to talk about mapping changes. However, when we have a future GPAC meeting looking at the draft documents, Betsy's recommendations are already going to be inserted, and so we will discuss it as a GPAC at that time. So they're great. They've been vetted through at least Shoreline, and I think that you'll really appreciate them when you do get to read them. It's just that in order to make sure that we covered all the mapping amendments, we kept to mapping amendment topics for this meeting.
So Betsy, did you catch all that?
Yes, but as I understand it, we only have 2 more official meetings of the GPAC before the adoption of the general plan.
Is that
And
right?
so I'm
We'll
concerned
cover
that
it in one of them then.
I'm concerned that the larger issues of
Never mind.
congruence between common issues for local area plans, planning areas, uh, growth boundaries, and so forth, will not. Well, maybe those will come into the discussion today because I think you did touch on those, the boundaries, the planning area boundaries, and so forth. So,
Yes.
but in terms of how we affect the content of the general plan, given that there's no specific section for social service issues like senior services, I don't know how to, I have to maneuver these recommendations into the structure that we have. And I would like to say, I don't think that structure is entirely useful to the new general plan. It's taken from the old general plan, but those are issues that I think need to be understood long before we get to the end results. So I'll just wait until I hear what you are proposing and then see if I can provide useful comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Okay. Mireya, is it possible to have another meeting if we need one?
Sure, I don't see why not.
Okay.
I'm happy to, once we figure out what that meeting would include, I'll
Yeah.
consult with the team to see.
I mean, we're going to want to look at all the elements, right, of the plan.
Well, it is kind of, yeah, that's kind of why you're here.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's carry on then. The 305 item, which is it's now 320, Housing Action and Implementation Plan Overview.
Nicole's doing that. Excellent. I think that's better. Yeah, anything that we can share locally. The only thing we could figure out why the last meeting was so glitchy is because we had off-site GIS presentations, and I think it was kind of like making the system go tilt. So
Taking all the bandwidth.
yeah, we're doing as much locally today now to avoid that.
Thank you.
I don't like glitchy. It's taking a minute. Oh yeah, maximize it. I don't see a share screen up there. Okay. Okay, great. Sam to the rescue. Oh, okay, so. Hey, Donna, can you see the presentation from wherever you are? I'm just checking to make sure it's visible in Zoom.
Yes, I can see it.
You can see it? Excellent. No, you're good. Feel free. Excellent. Okay. Now we need Nicole unmuted, unless it's Ian.
Hi, this is Nicole West.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes. All right.
It's saying that I can't start my video. The host would have to enable it, so I can leave my video off, or if
Yeah,
the
just
host
leave
would
your
like
video
to.
off. That should be fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Well, thank you for having me here today to talk with you about the Housing Action and Implementation Plan. I know you have a lot on your agenda today, so I'm going to be as brief as possible, but I wanted to let you know that we provided a presentation to the Board of Supervisors on December 10th, and it's more comprehensive than what I can talk about today. And so if you'd like to see that, it is on YouTube. But today I'll give you a little bit of an overview and then talk about some of the key findings from the analysis and the outreach and how that relates to the land use changes that you're talking about today. So the Housing Action and Implementation Plan is a comprehensive manual to address housing demands throughout the county, and much of it also applies to Lakeport and Clear Lake as well. It's related to, but it's not a part of the general plan. However, it will be a really good foundation for the housing element, which is coming up soon in about a year and a half, getting started on that. And a lot of this work will dovetail with that. The components of the HAPE, there's an analysis of current conditions, really robust summary of engagement. We were able to join forces with the general plan team on a lot of that. We have an analysis of gaps and then goals and strategies, as well as concrete action steps for implementing the goals and strategies and resources to aid with that. We're also analyzing sites across the county, and we'll have those on an interactive web map. We've been working on this for about a year, and we're getting close to the end of this. The HAPE has gone through administrative review with staff, and we are getting really close to having a draft to release to the public. We could go to the next slide. So some of the important findings from the analysis and the outreach is that there's a need for a variety of different housing types, and also need for housing that's affordable to people at all different income levels. And I'm not just talking about housing that's reserved as affordable, but just simply different price points across the range of incomes. And then also there was broad support from folks for amending zoning regulations to be more flexible and also to speed up residential construction. The community definitely considers maintaining and rehabilitating homes and neighborhoods as a high priority. And maintaining and rehabilitating neighborhoods could also mean revitalizing neighborhoods by doing adaptive reuse of buildings that could be utilized differently. That's another component of that. Also, another key finding is there is strong support for residential infill development, and there's also a real need for that to keep development away from agriculture, open space, and wildfire hazards, and also then to get the benefits of developing where there's already existing infrastructure like curbs and gutters and sidewalks, as well as water and wastewater services. Infill development also provides access to retail, restaurants, offices, parks, other civic uses, and other amenities. And then the last benefit here of infill development that I want to highlight is connectivity to transportation networks and increased walkability and bikeability. Let's go to the next slide. So I just wanted to show you these examples of mixed-use walkable neighborhoods. This could come at a density kind of like you see here, where, we're not talking about Manhattan-style urbanism, but we're talking about neighborhoods that are connected and walkable and have destinations that are nearby, and they're pedestrian scaled. And can have a real liveliness to them, and people really enjoy being in these locations. So this is kind of what we're talking about. I'm gonna ask to switch to the next slide and talk about our idea for how to get there, for where it would be appropriate within the county. Our initial idea here, which is just in its idea state right now, this is something that can be developed over time, but we were looking at the combining districts, and we were thinking that doing a mixed-use infill combining district could really make sense for the county. And the purpose would be to encourage infill development so that the rural character can be preserved. And this could also allow for a greater variety of types of residential development that are not currently allowed in existing neighborhoods and existing population centers. And then also by using a mixed-use infill combining district, that could be designed for walkability. Neighborhoods could be designed for walkability, connectivity, and access to amenities. And it could also be used to incentivize the kind of development that the county would like to see within a district like this. So we've been talking about with staff and with the team about a potential process for getting this achieved. And there's a lot of outreach still with GPAC and LAPACs and the county to talk about this idea, since this is really the first time it's being introduced. And then we talked about potentially an implementation action going in the local area plans where appropriate, for the county to work with the community to identify what criteria would be used for applying a future combining district. It can be based on location. We looked at, in particular, we were looking at some corridors and nodes and areas where there are parcels that would score high on a competitive tax credit application for affordable housing. And in some cases, those properties do not currently allow housing, but those may be good places to allow housing, since they would be really good candidates for getting extra credits on those TCAC applications. And they're within community growth boundaries, they're near other existing uses. And so some of these are different ideas here about criteria that could be used for where these combining districts might go. It could be based on locations or certain existing uses, where places where there's really good access, or other findings that we haven't talked about yet. And so we're proposing that during the future zoning code update that the county will be doing, that specific language is determined, and then the locations or criteria for locations is finalized, and then that combining district would be applied where it would be appropriate. So that's what I have for you today. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Are there any questions from the GPAC? I just want to say I love this idea. I mean, it's how we get there is important, but I really approve of it.
And across all local areas or local planning areas, mixed use was strongly supported in the surveys.
Yeah.
So we're really excited both to how it'll help us to meet our next RENA numbers, as well as how it'll be an ability to encourage housing development while still maintaining our rural character, which was also a high priority.
Yeah. Yes.
Could you just say who made this presentation? I missed it at the beginning.
Sure. That's Nicole West. She is also with PlaceWorks, but she's with the Housing Action and Implementation Plan team.
So it's the same group that's...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we were lucky that PlaceWorks has the staff capacity to have had a couple amendments. They've taken on our climate adaptation plan and also the housing action and implementation plan. So it really helps just to have everything synthesized as we're going forward.
And will we get a number? You had mentioned, I think last time, a number of how many new housing units we have to identify?
Great question. That is the RENA number, which has still not been released by the state yet. Once it gets released by the state, it goes to our Lake County APC, our Area Planning Council, which operates not only as Lake and Mendocino transportation planners, but also they've been designated by the state to handle divvying up those RENA numbers between the county and both cities. And so when they get it to us, that's when it'll be available. It's not necessarily part of Lake County 2050 yet, because we aren't working on the housing element yet. But it's crucial that our housing element will meet that number requirement. So if we're still meeting as a GPAC by then, I'm happy to share it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I recognize. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a question for the HAPE team. Did the HAPE team take a look at the big picture, the county map, to identify, at least in a rough sort of way or high level, where is housing potential?
We did take a look already at areas that are not currently zoned for residential, however, would meet a certain criteria that are required for what's called the TCAC. Don't ask me what that means, but it is the criteria that is necessary in order for a housing developer to qualify for some of the income-connected housing development. Those spots have been identified so far. However, we've recognized that each community really needs to provide the feedback on those. So that's why that's not an official part of your recommendation. Instead, you're getting the more holistic conceptual idea of what this could look like. But as to where it's going to go, we're going to be looking for LAPAC input.
Is the, theoretically, I mean, will that number that the state gives, will that include the housing stock? The number that the state gives, will that include the housing stock that we've lost over the last 10 years? Or is it, do they have that information?
Oh, they have it. And yes, it will be included. And that is why when I say RENA, I say it with a certain aspect of fear. Though the properties that were lost, those are still zoned for residential. So it's not like we've rezoned them in the meantime. So the number is going to look big, but yeah, we'll sort of break it down into this is the stuff that we lost, and this is where the state thinks we're going as far as growth into the future. And that is a 6-year cycle. We get RENA numbers for every housing element cycle, which is a 6-year period. So it'll include some forecasted growth.
Do you have a question?
Just two comments. One is, from my experience living in another part of the state, I mean, planned communities work. When you can say, this is what we'd like to accomplish in a certain area, and you set up the criteria then for what's going to be in that area and how it must be. Those kind of communities, which are few and far in between, because mostly we graft onto communities that began in the 1850s and kind of worked forward, so we're kind of stuck with a lot of stuff that's not functional anymore. But if you can identify a piece of land and it's made attractive to developers with criteria for what must be done there and how it should be done, I think those kind of sort of pocket communities work, and I think they're suited for Lake County. The other comment I wanted to make in terms of that same issue of what are you going to count in available places for houses to be built, do they also look at current private communities? For example, well, just in the Rivieras alone, there's probably 600 to 700 buildable vacant lots at the moment that have water, they have power, they have facilities and so forth and so on. That's a lot of building sites that are
They
currently
absolutely count.
good.
Yes, and that first point that you made, I'm hoping we'll revisit that, because that's exactly the kind of countywide nugget that I think the board would really appreciate getting from GPAC.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the online GPAC members? I don't see any hands raised. Do you? Okay, question here.
Just wondering, do you know what the state's criteria is for determining the number of housing sites? Maybe that hasn't been determined, I don't know.
No, it's just a running joke as to how much we actually understand what the state is thinking when they send us requirements. So other than that facetious comment, I don't have much insight to give you.
Thank you, Maria.
Certainly. Thank you.
All right, any other GPAC questions? Should we open it to the public for questions?
Good afternoon, Bob Gardner, North Shore. A lot of the unhoused people are disabled Americans, and they usually get special accommodations. So I would encourage as much flexibility to the Planning Commission as possible for this group. I'm glad we're doing mixed usage, because there's a lot of properties just sitting empty, and it's silly to not convert them into housing. So also one commendation, somebody talked last week about notifying people when their property is changing. And I think that's a great thing, having experienced a problem with the last general plan. So, thank you. No question, statement.
Any other questions from the public on this presentation?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Wes Baker, Lower Lake. My concern is that on that the mixed use, and they put up some lovely pictures. You know, the pictures look nice. It looked like somewhere you'd go to on vacation or something like that. I mean, it really looked like something from a not community development, but a Chamber of Commerce or something like that to a tourist area. It really looks good if they build stuff like that. And some places they do stuff like that. And PUD is one way, planned development is one way of doing it, making them pay for a lot of stuff when they do it so the county doesn't have to pay. Generally that works in a city though better than in a county area. But like the last gentleman just spoke, there is a lot of vacant stuff as you drive around the lake. And if you look at a lot of the lots, and I've been looking all over these maps lately, and if you look at a lot of the lots and you drive around, you look at a lot of the empty stuff or that thing's gone and all this, it's commercial. And the commercial, how do you attract the commercial up here? I mean, we talked last week, I think from your meetings that you had in the community, the Dollar General's not wanted, especially up on top of Cobb Mountain on the little triangle spots that was going to change it from C whatever to the open zone. And then what happened in Clear Lake Oaks when the Dollar General showed up when it was supposed to be a wine tasting room. There's a lot of commercial stuff that's empty, and there's not a lot of people up here that have the funds to operate the business. There's a lot of people up here that have the dream, and the dream generally up here is just that. Sad to say, they want to have a donut shop. Okay, yeah, and I'll make it quick. But so if we would work towards maybe converting some of that commercial stuff into a live work, where the commercial buildings below and the people can live up above, and
so you support the proposal?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, but finally, stay away from the ag. Let's not do the ag. Let's leave the ag alone. We've got plenty of stuff. The other gentleman just mentioned, all the lots in the Riviera, and frankly, on those maps that I've been looking at, there's not much that anybody even contemplated up there. And there's a lot of stuff there. Thank you.
Wes, thank you. All right. Anyone else? Let's move on to the next item then. Update on any hands raised online? No. Okay. Update on request from February 13th, GPAC meeting.
Yes, so in addition to the request for the housing action and implementation presentation, a request was presented to staff in regard specifically to the capacity for additional residential connections through the Lower Lake. It's got some kind of name like Waterworks, or the Lower Lake Water District.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that right? Okay, good. And that was in relation to when the GPAC was looking at every individual land use designation amendment, which we switched later, but I still wanted to get back to you. So we did contact the Water District. There is not a moratorium currently. I just hypothetically had them ask if they could, at this time, cover an additional 10 single-family dwelling units. And they said, yeah, that'd be fine. That each home as it gets built does require its own individual approval by the district for connection. Mm-hmm. But that, yes, right now, if they had 10 additional requests, they would not find that problematic.
Thanks. Let's move to item, the 325 item, which is the LAPAC recommended community growth boundary changes. This is a presentation only?
Yes, this is an informational only presentation so that the GPAC has an understanding and awareness of the recommendations coming from the LAPACs, but we are not seeking any action on these updates.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Tanya Sundberg. I'm with PlaceWorks, and I'll deliver this brief presentation. So the LAPACs did recommend a few changes to the community growth boundaries. So these are boundaries that define where future development should be focused. And they're important because there is policy guidance in the general plan and in the local area plans that support this limit to community growth. For example, the general plan and local area plans limit certain types of land uses to areas within community growth boundaries. Next slide, please. So the first of the two recommended changes to community growth boundaries is for the Kelseyville community growth boundary. The LAPAC recommended an expansion to this boundary in the northwest corner. You can see the existing community growth boundary is shown in purple, and then the green shows the proposed area where it would be expanded. So this land where it would be expanded is currently designated agriculture in the western area, and then designated industrial in the eastern expansion area. Do you want to add anything more?
I'd be happy to, yes. So on the left side, on the western side, that is land that was recently rezoned, or not recently, actually it was a few years ago. The portion that is not covered in the vineyard was rezoned to industrial for ag support related businesses. The portion on the right was an area that is already zoned industrial, and as as I described last week on land use designation amendments, both of these were recommended to be included in the community growth boundary to allow for future industrial development.
When the timing for that was when? When did that change happen?
It is one of the recommendations from the LAPAC.
Right now, okay.
Yes, the left-hand side, that area, or the western side, has already gone through a general plan amendment and rezone to industrial.
Okay.
And then the right side, we weren't sure why that wasn't already in the community growth boundary because it was already industrial. So the LAPAC recommended those additions.
Recognize.
When you say the left side, I'm looking at my little map. I found the little pink part up there.
Could you turn on your microphone?
Turn on your mic. The green part, I think, is the left.
The green part that's outside that magenta part, that's the increase or the amendment.
It's got this little poke thing like this.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the. Yeah, see where the cursor is right there?
Oh, yeah.
No, Brian Hansen's property, remember that's past Kelseyville Lumber? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the one that's poking out just at the.
You know, when you have this many nooks and crannies to a shape, it's very hard to describe a particular spot.
Oh, okay, I see now. We did have a little conversation about that particular one. Is that?
We deferred any action.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Back to you, Tanya.
Next.
Okay, next slide. We've got one other LAPAC recommendation for a community growth boundary change, which is in the southeastern part of the Lower Lake community growth boundary. So that area is all currently designated suburban residential reserve.
Yeah, we discussed that one last time, right?
We did, and this one already has the municipal services that one would expect to see within a community growth boundary.
Okay. I don't think we knew that entirely. And we deferred action on that.
I think it was right around that point where we switched from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, that actually is the extent of the recommended community growth boundary changes. So I think it's back to the chair for questions.
Okay, we had, I'm feeling like we had a lot of Q&A on those two already. Is there any other conversation we need to have here today on that one?
I could add just a little bit of context. We did not get a lot of recommendations for adjustments on community growth boundaries because typically around the lake, most of the conversation centered on the fact that we aren't bursting at the seams.
Right.
You know, we don't really need to expand
We have
now.
infill opportunities.
And that's why you only have a couple before you today.
Excellent. And we're not deciding on those today, so.
Correct.
Okay.
But I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is a process question. So at what time would decisions be made and in what format?
Could you be more specific on?
Yeah,
what
so we're not making decisions today, but at some point, GPAC will be asked for its recommendations, say on these recommendations from LAPACs, right?
I don't know that the board expects GPAC input on LAPAC recommendations. But the majority of today's meeting is actually for GPAC to consider countywide recommendations to go before the board.
So the board, for example, consider infill before expanding into ag, those countywide guidelines that we would recommend.
Yes.
We had a good discussion last time, and I'm glad it produced this. Yes. All right. Any comments from the public or questions from the public on this? Oh, Betsy, I'm sorry. Betsy's hand is up. Let's recognize Betsy Kahn first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This whole subject goes to one of the 2 or 3, what I call meta concerns for the entire general plan. I know this is not something this is not familiar language to a lot of people, but in every community growth boundary, there are utility services and public services. And by utilities, I'm talking about water, sewer, electricity, public services like fire protection, and some law enforcement presence and so forth. I recommended or asked if we could recommend that we use the same point of view that is designed into the local area, local agency formation commission, where the expansion of independent special districts includes a series of future projections of spheres of influence. So, for example, and I'll use the example of Clear Lake Oaks. Clear Lake Oaks has, number one, has a very large water and sewer district, independent special district. It also has an unusual addition with the island of the Paradise Cove subdivision, which is served by the water services there. But it has a sphere of influence. Let's say that sphere of influence is out, or just for the heck of it, say it's out a quarter of a mile or a third of a mile beyond the existing district boundary. Well, I think the community growth boundaries would benefit from having a similar perspective. So you want to be sure, first of all, that you don't have a community growth boundary that does not include the existing district boundary. But then when if you're going to add any territory, that it does not exceed the sphere of influence of those public services. And just looking at those together would help us understand where the long-term 5, 10, and 20-year growth projections would be, as opposed to just saying, this is what we want now. Yes, infill will take care of just about every possible housing need that we have. The comments about the commercial zoning, limiting investment here, is pertinent from the other speaker, the member of the public. but there's a congruence factor that would be beneficial if we did take those into consideration.
Betsy, a question for you. Would you be willing to write this in a sentence or two as if it were a recommendation from the GPAC to the board?
It's in my letter.
It's in your letter. Perfect.
That's the thing. Okay, but I can do that.
Well, just maybe take the yellow highlighter out, because I think this sounds to me like this is a potential recommendation.
It would be very beneficial, I think, to the whole ultimate general plan, the long-term general plan. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other hands raised from the committee? All right. Wes?
Can I ask a question first? Is what's the zoning that's FMP? FMMP. I know that the F is farm. And it's like because there was some lots on the map that presently are zoned something else, but it said possible FMMP. It's not a big deal if it's going to take time. I don't want to take away their time. I don't want to keep you guys here till 7.
We think it has to do with the farmland mapping and monitoring program.
There's kind of a possible overlays in it a little bit.
It is. That is a designation derived from the state.
Okay.
Thank goodness, because I had no idea what we're talking about. Okay.
Because on the map, when if you clicked on the
Yes.
property, it would give you all that detail.
Exactly.
It was in that detail.
Yes,
Okay.
and so the way that pertains to or connects to what you were saying before is that part of those soils are the class 1 through 4, which are prime ag soils, which we want to protect at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, we were talking about that property in Lower Lake, the little long little strip there
of parcels.
Yeah, and that it's not in the boundary presently. I think you're saying that they want to try to put it in the boundary. Presently, it's not in the Lower Lake boundary. You reached out to the water district, and they said it was okay for 10. That's good. The water line is out there. I researched it. There is a water line out there, but there's nothing's hooked up to it. It's on that side of the road. It was a line that was put in a long time ago when the Homestake mine was out there. It was a water line that fed them, and that's all it did. It had no laterals coming off it or anything like that. It's now basically, it's got water in it, but it's abandoned. It's not in use. The lots, which on the map, they look small. It looks like a little string. And I think last week it was talked about that it was maybe 6 acres and you could keep 2 horses on it, or if the zoning was changed and all that kind of stuff. Some of those lots out there are 20 acres that's shown on that. That's pretty big. I took all the lots and I added them all up from the information little box that shows below how big the area was. It totals 75 acres in Lower Lake. Now, 75 acres is nothing to just turn and look away on. That's a lot of land. And then if you recall last week when we talked about that a little bit, I'm not saying it's a motive, but it's a possible motive. It was a subdivision, that changing it, you could subdivide it. And you wouldn't have to be under the county restrictions of whatever it is, 4 acre, 5 acre minimum or whatever. It would be out of that. It would be in the Lower Lake. You could probably cut it down. You could probably subdivide in Lower Lake down to half an acre or even a city lot. I have no idea. But if that was the case and it was 75 acres, it was also talked about that a lot of it was hillside, unusable for building. So even if you averaged all that out, it could be 75 homes. It could be 150 homes. Someone could stand a chance to making anywhere from 7 million to 25 million just off the sale of the lots alone, without doing the division. I'm not saying that's bad, that any of this is bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying that's something that you as a committee, we don't want to just rubber stamp that. my own feeling is that if someone's got that much land out there and they want to do that with it, that's the kind of stuff that needs to come to the planning commission, go through the whole process of notifying all the neighbors, saying I'm this, One of the speakers last week spoke for another property owner who wasn't here, in a courtroom. That's hearsay. You could just make up whatever you want. They're not here to answer it, and they're not here tonight. So that's what I got to say about Lower Lake. And then I got one thing on Kelseyville, and a lot of folks are here that were here last week. Maybe they heard the same thing I heard. I don't really know, but that property in Lower Lake that we were just talking about, that square, and then adding the other part and putting that inside, or Kelseyville, and putting that in it. Last week that was ag land. Now this week it's industrial. I don't quite understand what's going on here with that.
So that's a question.
Just to make sure I understand which property we're talking about, as far as land use designation amendments, we were talking about a parcel that was right on Highway 29, where the LAPAC recommended it go from ag to medium density residential. That's not included in the community growth boundary expansion.
Okay.
And so
sounds like it's a different parcel from what we were talking about last time.
Yes, today we covered farther north, lands that are already designated industrial.
It's that block at the end of the street.
The block.
We had one next to the high school, and we had one on the other side of town.
Yep. Yeah, that one is not within the recommendation for the community growth boundary expansion.
Oh, okay. Then
all right.
It's just hard to see the map.
Okay, Wes, thank you.
Okay.
All right, anyone else need to speak on this?
Hi, I'm Michael Santarelli. Want to talk about, I'm the person requesting that these 8 parcels be put in the Lower Lake Community Growth Boundary. I made a few notes if I can stick with them. These properties, by the way, they're right here. This map was furnished by the planning department.
Before you get going on this, is 2 things. One, we're not making a decision on this today.
Correct. No
Correct?
action is being requested.
No action's being
regarding
requested.
Any individual recommendation from the LAPACs.
Today. Now, we as a board may want to revisit these items before we make our final recommendations to the board, correct?
You're the GPAC.
We're the GPAC. We'll do that. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's why I want to sort of talk about it now and clear up some things that were just said that are not true.
Okay.
First of all, as I say, these are where the parcels are. They're on the fringe of the Lower Lake boundary. I have small little maps. If you would like to see one, I can pass them out to you. I don't know if that's appropriate.
If you have it available, yes,
yeah,
that would be great.
Just 4 of them anyway.
Share.
Can you take on?
We'll share.
And you can see they're just right across the street from the boundary, the community growth boundary. These, there's 7 homes on these 8 parcels. All of them are hooked up to the Lower Lake Water District. It's not a dead line. They're all using Lower Lake water. Just before I say anything more, not one person owns all these. There's individual owners. So not one person that I know of is thinking about doing any subdivision. This is a plan for the 25 years down the road for allowing people to perhaps find a place to build a home. Anyway, these parcels are within a mile, some of them, of the Lower Lake Fire Department. They're very close to town. Some of them are just a half a mile from the fire department. Others are just a little bit further. They are in as I mentioned, the Lower Lake Community Growth Boundary is just right across the street. These parcels are on a paved, county-maintained road. It has electricity. It has the water. And AT&T put a fiber optic cable right down the street on this side of the road where these parcels are. So they're ready to get good cable someday. I'm not sure how you do that. There's also on another map that I was given. Wagner Road, which comes off of Morgan Valley, right near Bonham Road. And it was named after my grandfather, Anton Wagner, on my mother's side. We've had this property since 1913, some of it, not all of it. When the we're pretty good neighbors with the Lower Lake people. We donated the top of one of the hills to the Lower Lake Water District so they can put 2 100,000-gallon redwood tanks that fed the valley below and the town with water. And it was up there for maybe 20 years until they took it down. So I wanted to clear some things up. It would be helpful to get in the community growth boundary for, some people, perhaps they can do something, get another house out there and build a house for their family.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. I guess we've been working on the Q&A. Are there any questions, any more questions from? All right, then we will move to the next item, which is also an informational item. LAPAC recommended planning area boundary changes. Who's taking this one up, Mireya?
Well, I'm ready to take this one up. I think we just need to get the slides up.
That's Tanya.
This is
Tanya will
Tanya.
introduce it. I'll add anything that
All right.
I think you need to know.
Thank you. Okay, so the LAPACs did, in addition to the community growth boundary, also made some recommended changes to planning area boundaries. So these are the boundaries of each of the 8 local area plans in the county. These boundaries matter because some of the county's policy guidance applies at the local area plan level. So in the new general plan, we'll be covering many of the general plan topics at the local area plan level. So the policies related to those topics will apply to the planning area, the area within the boundary. So those topics include land use, circulation, open space conservation and recreation, environmental justice, public facilities and services, and economic development. So now we can kind of walk through a brief presentation of each of the recommended changes from the LAPAC. So next slide, please. So this first recommended boundary change is at the Lakeport and Upper Lake Nice boundary. The recommendation is to expand the Lakeport boundary into the area that's currently Upper Lake Nice. That expansion, so you can see the existing planning area boundary in black, and then that white line to the north is showing the proposed change. So that would, that's all located near the community of Blue Lakes, although the Blue Lakes community itself is still within the Upper Lake Nice planning area. And the lands within this change area are currently designated public lands, rural lands, and resource conservation just along the tributaries. Anything to add on this one, Mireya?
That's the whole Scotts Valley area?
Exactly. Scotts Valley currently is kind of divided, so this would include all of Scotts Valley into Lakeport.
All right. And who's making the recommendation?
That was the Lakeport LAPAC.
Okay.
Okay, so next slide. This is showing the boundary between Lower Lake and Middletown. The LAPAC recommended, this is a really small change that they recommended. You can see it's, Michelle's highlighting it in the cursor. So what the change is to include all of the Jerusalem grade subdivision within the Lower Lake planning area. Currently, just that a piece of that subdivision is within Middletown. All of those parcels are rural residential.
That came from the Lower Lake LAPAC.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So this is the boundary between Middletown and Cobb Mountain. The LAPAC recommendation is to expand the Middletown boundary into the Cobb Mountain planning area. Again, that's the white. So all of that land is currently designated rural residential, and then the resource conservation along riparian corridors and tributaries. And then there's one industrial designated parcel in that area.
That came from the Cobb Mountain Lakepack.
Right. And then next up is the Cobb Mountain and Kelseyville boundary. The recommendation is to expand the Cobb Mountain boundary into the Kelseyville planning area. And the area is primarily currently designated rural lands, resource conservation, agriculture, and then there's a small amount of suburban residential reserve above Boggs Lake.
This was a request from, or a recommendation from Cobb Mountain.
And that's the headwaters area, is that?
It just, to them, it just didn't really fit. They kind of felt like it was an extension, actually, of Kelseyville, and Cobb Mountain started further in the Cobb Mountain community. Kelseyville was amenable to that request. Actually, all these planning area boundary discussions were just discussed with each LAPAC, and everyone was amenable to all of these requests, with the exception of Middletown did not support. They wanted to keep the line in Jerusalem Valley, but typically, if LAPACs were not in support of recommendations amenable like together, then we didn't make that change. But this particular one I did because it's part of the same subdivision. So,
Got it.
But there are a couple that you're not going to see, like Rancheria Road, Kelseyville, and Lakeport both said it's fine, whatever the tribes want to do. And so the tribes have been consulted. They're consulting amongst their council, and will get back to us. The other one that's not included is Lamson Airport, because Kelseyville wanted it and Lakeport wanted it. So that's not on here.
Okay, got it. So where there's controversy,
I avoided it.
you avoid it.
Yes.
All right, yes.
What about the discussion that we had at the LAPAC with the Sunrise?
You need a mic.
Good.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, April. There was another option. Sunrise Shores is a community subdivision over in Lower Lake. It is separated in half. By part of it is in the Rivieras, part of it is in Lower Lake. So there was not a consensus on that one either.
So you've included the ones here that already we have consensus, or that staff felt
I gave you the
strongly
easy
enough.
ones.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just how will the questionable ones be determined of where they're going to land?
I was just going to leave that up to the board. If the GPAC would like to look at those and make recommendations, I'm happy to schedule it at a future meeting.
What's the wish of the GPAC?
I know that at the meetings that we had, everyone was asked to create notes or arguments for what they were proposing, if those were...
Those notes were taken into account in LAPAC meetings. I may not have mentioned them specifically to the LAPACers, but yes, all of that data was collected. Since these are local area plan matters, it didn't even occur to me actually to give it to you.
I appreciate that, actually. All right. Any comments? Question and
There was maybe another change to present. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, keep going.
Okay. So I think we are on Cobb Mountain and Lower Lake next. Okay. So the LAPAC recommendation here is to expand Cobb Mountain into the Lower Lake planning area. That area includes the Siegler Springs subdivision, and it's designated rural lands, rural residential, suburban residential reserve, and some ag. And I apologize, is this
That's
what you
Siegler
just-
Springs. Yeah,
Yeah.
the recommendation came from Cobb Mountain because Siegler Springs is an active part of their municipal advisory council. So this would more closely recognize the Cobb area council
Makes
boundaries.
sense. Okay. Thank you.
Great. And then I think one more, and I think Mireya, you were planning to cover this last one.
Oh yeah, this is a pretty one. So, the town of Lucerne at the Central Regional Town Hall meeting in December supported the idea of transferring Lucerne into the Upper Lake Nice planning area. And Shoreline Communities was also supportive of that idea as well. So the reason why I have to sort of walk you through this one is because we've been trying to figure out the exact boundaries of SERTH, because the map that was on the resolution creating SERTH was not right. So I just was notified from Supervisor Crandall that it is the zip code for Lucerne, 95458. So that will be reflected as a recommendation from the LAPAC.
Got it. And there's agreement on both?
Both communities are amenable, yes.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions from the committee members? All right. I don't see any hands. Are there any hands online? Any questions from the public on this? I have one question actually, and that is, when will we hear about the ones that are not agreed to? Or will we? Will you take those right to the board?
I was going to give it to the board.
Okay, that sounds
Y'all
good.
want to
that's fair enough.
around in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wes?
Hi. Yeah, I got two things, and one's kind of going back a step, is that the information I had that they had no water out there was taken right from your
Wes,
maps.
let's stay on this topic if we could do that.
I was just saying it was right from your maps.
Okay. Appreciate it.
I think we're hastily prepared. Okay.
Okay.
So on this subject here, I just want to say, I just like to see this committee vote your heart, know that you have the power over the vendors that were hired to help with this, and that you guys have the power. Do what's right, know what's going on, know when to tell folks that needs to be in the planning commission with exhibits handed out and all this kind of stuff to make all these zoning changes. This is not the forum for that. And I'm just here, like I said originally last week, to preserve ag in the county, and I hope you guys do too.
Yeah, I think we're with you on that. Thank you. All right. Any other members of the public need to speak?
I'm tangled up here. I'm Norman Kimes from Lower Lake, and this may be an appropriate forum, but I own two parcels east or west of the boundary change proposed at Jerusalem Grade. I have one 49.5 acre parcel that's from Middletown, and the 100 acre parcel is from Lower Lake. I am unclear, based on what I've heard here and other places, how this is going to impact me. I know there are different rates for the fire districts between those two areas, and that's not the only one. I'm not going to waste your time with all these little lists, because if it's just me, I'm going to get run over. That's the way government works. However, I'm with Wes. I disagree. Information only doesn't mean rubber stamp.
Right.
And that's the way it felt last week. I'm not trying to tell you, I think you run a great meeting. But you are here to collect data and recommend. That's your job.
Norm?
Yes.
Are you in support or not of the, this is, this is
have,
actually planning area. It's not
I don't have
zoning.
enough information to actually be able to tell you.
Okay.
And that's the problem, is that I don't know how it's going to impact me.
Okay.
And
got it.
I would like to know, but at this moment, I really don't.
We actually should ask that question.
That's a great question.
This is a plan. Yeah, this is a planning area suggested change.
And
how will that impact?
Every meeting, that exact same question came up: is what's the purpose? Does it benefit us to be in this planning area or the other one? And it has absolutely no connection to fire fees. It doesn't affect school districts. All of those have entire different decision-making processes.
But it does affect who's making the recommendations for that
So
area.
the way we use it does, yes. So the way we would use local area plans is when when we have a proposed project coming through planning, we are looking to make sure that the way that that project is currently described is supportive of the community's vision.
Okay.
And so we would be looking, so if that Jerusalem grade was switched over into Lower Lake, we would look at the Lower Lake planning
Vision.
area for their priorities, goals, and implementations.
Got it.
And any design review standards that they may have as well.
So he would want to attend the meetings of the local area planning group that affects his area in order to influence the vision of that area.
He's always welcome to do so. We really love it when public shows up to these things.
Most people don't feel that way about me.
But we love you. We do.
I am in the county, and I like being in the county, and I have no desire to be in Lower Lake or Middletown or any other city in this county. But I love Lake County. I really do. I just can't get along with people.
Thanks,
That's
Norman.
All right.
All right. Questions here? No? I see someone holding their mic button. No? You have a question?
I don't know if this was, when we're talking about local area planning groups.
Groups, yeah.
So, who come together.
Not zoning, not anything like that.
Yeah, right. You got to remember that sometimes those meetings had 6 people in it, I mean, the Rivieras area has a population of about 7,800 people, okay? About 6 people came together to make, recommendation for the other 7,000, people. That's just the way communities work. It's, so you have to keep that in perspective. So making decisions about whether this little piece should be in this planning group or that planning group are not earth-shattering decisions. I mean, they talk about the decision determines, well, what is this document going to contain and what is this document, which is very, very important. But it comes down to oftentimes whether my street that I live on is going to be in this planning section, or this one, the one I'm familiar with, where there is a controversy.
All right.
And there's good reasons on both sides of the argument, but as the gentleman said, at some point somebody's got to go, and we may be it, just having to review what we're given to review, what are the arguments on both sides, and then just say, well, got to make a decision here. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think we can, when we get to the 350 item, which by the way, we're about a half hour behind, so I'll blame the chair for that. When we get to that item, we should take up what kinds of recommendations we want to make. So I think that would be appropriate to have that conversation. We have a member of the public who wishes to speak.
Hi, Denise. Julia Carrera, Upper Lake. I just want to make sure that these changes that you're making to the LPEC boundaries actually follow lines of streets or some kind of monument or something, so we actually know where they are, because that was what I originally talked to you about. I don't know that that's the case. In regards to the Upper Lake addition of Lucerne, I'm not disagreeing with Maria, but I do want to clarify what she said. There are several of us that don't think it's a good idea. I happen to be one of them, because of ag. And what we did say was we're amenable to discussing it, and that's how we left it. Maria did send an email to me and another person that I believe is from the Lucerne area, who I believe she thought maybe we were going to have a problem with it. I'm going to go with whatever the majority says, but I would like to know which geographical LPAC is the largest in population, and which of these changes the LPAC is the largest in geography. And yes, it does change what's going to happen in our community based on where those lines are being drawn. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Well, let's move to our 350 item, which is actually on the agenda for 2 hours. I think we'll probably not spend 2 hours, given that we're a half hour behind. but the question, or discussion of countywide recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. And considering the LPAC recommendations along with our understanding of the hazard layers and HAIP, are there any other recommendations we have for the Board of Supervisors to consider in this process? That's a very broad topic. We'll try to manage it. Mireya, do you have any guidelines as to structure for us to have this conversation? If no's okay, an okay answer.
One, I just wanted to point out that Betsy did send in that email, so we might want to read that. And then also, what I'm looking for, or what I think would be helpful, is if the GPAC sort of thinks about the presentations that have been made over this meeting and the previous meeting, and if any countywide concerns or something you want the board to make sure about when they're looking at mapping changes. Land use designation changes, community growth boundary amendments, and the planning area boundary changes. And if there are any sort of more holistic type of county-wide things you want the board to know, we will capture that.
Yes, and you have been keeping good notes on our conversation so far. I'm wondering if anyone could summarize, and maybe we just go committee member by committee member, but summarize the things that have come up so far so we can save a little time at least getting through the list.
If you like, I could read Betsy's.
That would be good.
Excellent.
Oh, Betsy's got her hand up. Maybe Betsy wants to read Betsy's.
No, I just assumed that Mireya read that, please.
Okay.
The email is titled Congruence Between 5, 10, and 20-Year Projections for Community Growth Boundaries and Public Health and Safety Services. The delivery of required water, sewer, fire emergency service capacities may be inadequate to support the projected expansion boundaries of the population centers, and in parentheses, community growth boundaries. For each community growth boundary, expansion projections must not exceed the planned expansion boundaries of those required public health and safety services. Congruence between planned community growth boundaries and those of critical services would benefit the local area plans and general plan objectives, goals, policies, and implementation for all 10 community growth boundaries.
Okay, thank you. We also had some issues come up, and I'm going to recall the ones that we talked about deferring the conversation. One was generally supporting ag and avoiding, if possible, conversion of ag lands as general guideline to the board, which is actually also congruent with LAFCO. Another was these, where the two LAPACs disagree, we need to decide whether we weigh in and offer a recommendation. Those are the two I came up with. Any others any other topics we want to, as you recall all the conversation we've had so far, any other topics we want to make sure we weigh in on?
One topic that inadvertently came in at the last meeting was preservation of our resource conservation areas, our wetlands, and avoiding development in those locations. There was confusion last week because there was a green overlay on areas that were near Anderson Marsh, and so Wes brought that up, and it was a really good point, so we reviewed that as well, and there are no recommendations for land use designation changes anywhere in Anderson Marsh. There's a possibility of some of those identified locations from the Housing Action and Implementation Plan were of lands that were not currently zoned for residential but would be quite suitable. Some of those were south of Anderson Marsh. And I think that overlay was on the map for the public to review and before we decided to remove it. And so I think that's where the confusion came. But if the GPAC wanted to stress that we want to preserve our wetlands and our resource conservation areas and avoid development, that seemed to be a theme of the last
that is a theme. I guess I would ask the committee if there is a willingness to have the conversation about adopting Betsy's recommendation about sphere of influence and congruence with existing community growth boundary spheres as read by Mireya. Do we want to have that conversation and then make a recommendation to the board on that?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Betsy.
may I please speak?
Of course you may.
Thank you. There are 3 issues related to this very complicated proposal.
Okay.
In the first place, there are 10 growth boundary areas and 8 planning areas. The fact that Lucerne was included originally in the shoreline communities area plan left out the community of Nice, which has shoreline properties and similar zoning and land use issues. However, the proposal to shift the Municipal Advisory Council jurisdiction of Lucerne, which has no separate planning committee, to the west was documented, it was reviewed, and it was discussed on December 9th, as Maria said, by the CERF members and members of the Lucerne, the Upper Lake and Nice LAPAC were supportive, and the rationale had to do with those populations served by the senior centers, which have a direct relationship to emergency response and disaster preparedness, as well as territory for use of commercial and government services, where, for example, Clear Lake Oaks is the destination of most of the people that live in Glen Haven, but not the people in Nice, because we have our own commercial district and we're close to the city of Lakeport, which is the county seat. So those things were documented, they were discussed, they were approved heartily by the CERF members, and the misunderstanding about the location of Upper Lake and Nice as an agricultural community rather than a shoreline community is simply a problem that was created in the year 2000, a local area plan, where the decision was made to designate the town of Upper Lake as a tourist attraction and part of the shoreline communities that were designed to improve attractions for tourism, whereas Upper Lake is hugely agricultural, and we do not wish to change the character of that community. So that's one. The larger issue that I raised or tried to raise, where we have 10 growth boundaries, 8 planning areas, 7 municipal advisory councils, and multiple ad hoc groups working on different aspects of these local area plans, is what makes it difficult to understand why the town of Lucerne, which has a municipal advisory council but no planning area of its own, why that would fit better by splitting the 2 sides of District 3 as a political district. So I would hopefully request that you had seen that. If you haven't seen that, I can certainly send it. I know it was submitted to Maria at some point, but yeah, because we talked about it at the December 9th CERF meeting.
Betsy, do you have a suggestion for the General Plan Advisory Committee today on us landing on a recommendation around any of that?
Yeah, I recommend that you approve the shift of the Municipal Advisory Council jurisdiction of Lucerne into the Upper Lake Nice planning area as approved by that board. Thank you.
Okay. That almost sounded like a motion, so I think we ought to have a conversation about that for this body. Is this group willing to make such a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors? It sounds like there wasn't any controversy. I mean, it didn't sound like either planning area objected to that. Is that correct, Mary?
No, they all approved. We went to the Upper Lake Nice. We went to the Shoreline Communities.
Okay.
We actually went to CERF, the Municipal Advisory Council,
Okay.
and there was support for that transition.
Well, just the overall way we could say that is that this group supports the recommendations that were developed by
The LAPACs.
various areas in compliance with or in agreement with one another.
For the planning area.
Ones that weren't in agreement with one another will have to be addressed, but
Okay.
certainly we can support the ones that, there's no controversy.
Yeah. Any other comments on this topic? Any members of the public wish to comment on that particular topic? All right, well, I'll look for a motion. That sounds a lot like what you just said.
I'll make a motion that, that this body supports what's the word I want to use? Supports a
Recommendations?
cooperative recommendation of the planning areas concerning changes to the planning area boundaries. The key being cooperative agreement or cooperative development.
How about consensus?
We have consensus? Anyone opposed?
No, it's all right. I meant LAPAC recommendations that were
All those
that
who,
had
yes.
consensus by
So
all
the
LAPACs.
motion is all those that have consensus and are not argued among the LAPACs. Right. So any comments or discussion? I'll look for a second.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Got one done. There we go. We're on a roll now. All right. Betsy, you had other recommendations that were beyond this, and one of them had to do with the sphere of influences.
Yes, I had two concerns about the structure of the general plan update document, where we are not addressing certain aspects of community growth boundaries and shared utility districts and so forth. That's a whole larger question, and it doesn't belong on today's agenda.
Okay, got it. All right. Okay, so are there any other specific recommendations that the General Plan Advisory Committee wishes to weigh in on today? Yes.
I don't know if I turn this on. I was wondering when we were talking earlier about the housing element and creating those kinds of areas. We had a wonderful presentation at our BVAC about transportation development throughout the county. I think it'd be helpful if some of that was shared with this committee. I can't remember the gentleman's name.
It's John Spica from the Area Planning Council.
Yeah, but that was very interesting and very helpful, just to know what was going on a more global look throughout the county for transportation, everything from walkable to bikeable to, I think he even said, he didn't say horseable, but horse riding.
Yeah.
It was bad.
So that would be a good presentation.
Yeah.
A good element to know.
Right, and road development, and for instance, like, what's Caltrans thinking about?
Is it, I'll ask the General Plan Advisory Committee this, is it appropriate for us to weigh in today on the proposal in the housing element presentation for mixed use as a concept, as an idea?
I would like to make a motion.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. It was strongly felt in the Lower Lake LPAC that it was so important. We have so many empty business buildings that could be housing, and we have such, especially in the rental area, housing, that we really felt strongly that those to encourage mixed use. So I would like to make a motion that we encourage the board to use more or
Adopt the
Yes.
concept of mixed use in. All right, is there a second to this motion, and then we'll have discussion?
I would just add the word planned to the.
Planned, planned
Planned.
mixed use, yes.
Yeah.
Is that okay with the
Yes.
motion? Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Let's have any discussion on this item?
If I could get clarification for that motion, planned mixed use to me says developments that do not yet exist. Marty was talking more about allowing transition.
Transition and infill. The idea that as presented by,
Great, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
I don't mean to modify your motion, but as presented by the,
The LPAC
Yeah.
within the growth boundary.
as presented as part of the housing element general plan presentation we received today. That idea that was presented on how to move forward with mixed use.
And by planned, I meant not just create an open designation and then people can come in and say, oh, I know what that means, and do their own thing. Planned communities work because a lot of the decisions about what will go in are made beforehand
With
and then they're
guidelines, yeah.
enforced, you know.
A lot of our discussion was based on the development of Twin Lakes that did not have water, that did not have sewer, and the ramifications of that. So we wanted to be very clear that any future development had the available resources to support any kind of growth or changes that have been
Yeah.
requested.
So let's sum up the motion again.
I was just going to add a little more information that probably one of the most successful planned communities in California is the city of Santa Clarita, where it was just onion fields and ranch land, Spanish, you know, and since one family owned it all, they were able to create a planned community where nothing was built until they had planned the whole area. Where they had a busy street, they didn't want any children to have to cross a busy street to go to school, so they built paseos, bridges across every, that was all on paper before and every developer, and there's, I don't know how many housing developments there now, a bazillion, but they all had to obey the original, you know, that's what I mean by planned.
Yes.
You can,
Okay. And I don't think we're getting down to that level of detail in this motion, but I think we're saying that we saw a presentation that presented an idea of mixed use in a planned fashion, and we want to encourage the board to support that. Did I sum that up? Okay.
I just wanted to add that the Riviera's LPAC had the same experience and conversation.
Yes.
Can I have a consideration? I don't know if this is the right place. Is anecdotal, but I know in Kelseyville, there are a couple of business owners that would like to renovate their buildings, but it's a financial barrier. Is there something that we could put in there that the board might help research opportunities for, I don't know, various streamline or help with getting grants, or there's some tax benefits or something, because oftentimes it's not the desire to do it, it's the financial burden that is the impediment.
I do think that was a part of the presentation too, that once you say you want this, there are many tools available
Right.
at a local jurisdiction to help make it happen.
Right. But knowing what they are sometimes is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Comments?
Oh, yes. Hi, Shannon Sanders from Middletown. And I don't want to dig too much into the weeds regarding the mixed use, but I think that the current ordinance requires 1,000 square feet of commercial for every one residential unit. One way that might make it more viable is if there would be a consideration or a recommendation to maybe modify that. I know in Cobb, I think the square footage of a home, they reduced it to like 400 square feet or something, allowing for more units to be built economically. Same with the mixed use. If it had not such a high standard of 1,000 square feet commercial for every residential, that might be something to promote the mixed use concept.
Is it the same in each of those areas? Because he just said Cobb is one, Middletown is another, and I don't know exactly what Lower Lake is.
I don't know if they've come up with policies yet or policy suggestions yet.
We have not, go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, just to clarify,
Go ahead.
the Cobb was probably a bad example. That was a single-family home square footage, but I was
Yeah.
just trying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria.
There was a strong preference in the community-wide surveys that were distributed supporting mixed use. And whenever you're ready, I'm kind of writing draft ones if you want me to read them back to make sure I got them right.
Okay. You want to?
Okay, yes. Encouraged mixed use. This is from Marty making a motion, including shared primary uses, which is a planning term for both commercial and residential.
Mhm.
This would take care of that residential accessory or limited use, which Shannon just mentioned, be added as an option within community growth boundaries for both new planned development and existing commercial areas. Part of what Phil said was actually sounding like a different one, which is encourage walkable neighborhood planning for multimodal transportation. And then the third one, sorry, I don't mean to point, encourage county policy to seek options for ways to support mixed-use development. This could include governmental obstacles, funding sources, etc.
Wow, that sounds good. Thank you. Okay, you agree? Second agrees. Any other comments? Wes.
Yeah, I have just one. On that mixed use, I used to work in the Bay Area, and we call it live work.
Mhm.
And it was a big deal down there. You know, the whole downtown Oakland, San Francisco, everything was being torn down and rebuilt with buildings underneath and
Mhm.
people living above. And truly, that's the answer for a lot of the commercial stuff that's up here right now, is that, you know, the problem is the funding. You know, you mentioned the funding. So where do you get the money to, you're living in your house, you're making a house payment, now you got to find some money to go buy a commercial building or whatever to start your business up, and you got to have money for your business start. But the ideal, again, it's a dream like you know, talked about farm dream, is that if you lived upstairs and all you have to do is go downstairs to go to work, that's ideal. And at the same time, probably the cost of that, even that unit that's set up like that, would be equal to maybe just a little bit more than what you'd be paying for a house payment. And then that makes it affordable for people to get in there and try to do something. And it could really help, you know, not even in I'm with you on the planning, you know, but it doesn't even really need to be planned, because this could be something that could happen all over the lake in all these buildings that are empty. And a lot of them are small. Like Clear Lake, we're not talking about Clear Lake because that's the city, right? But you go through Clear Lake and there's a lot of small little things that are just boarded up, you know?
Yeah, thank you, Wes. Anyone else? All right, I'll bring it back to the committee. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank you. We are cooking with gas. There we go. All right, anything else that we have heard so far that we want to discuss and make recommendations to the board?
No action was taken on Betsy's email.
On Betsy's email. And what's the appropriate action that you are looking for? What do you?
It would be, that would be a recommendation to the BOS from LAPAC.
Yeah, okay. Any questions or conversations? Has everybody seen the email and read it? That would be the first question.
When was it sent to us?
She just sent it to Denise and I. That's the one I just read.
Oh, well, we then should, the one you just read?
Yes.
Okay.
About community growth boundaries and matching them to municipal
Can
districts.
you read
in
it
regard
again?
to
Because it sounded good to me, and I read the email, obviously. I should have shared it with everybody, apparently.
No problem. The delivery of required water, sewer, fire emergency service capacities may be inadequate to support the projected expansion boundaries of the population centers. For each community growth boundary, expansion projections must not exceed the planned expansion boundaries of those required public health and safety services. congruence between planned community growth boundaries and those of critical services would benefit the local area plans and general plan objectives, goals, policies, and implementations for all 10 community growth boundaries. If I could just add something, sometimes it goes the other way around. Sometimes the community tells LAFCO where they want to expand, or it tells the county government where we want to expand, and then the county government takes that as an annexation project or a modification of a sphere of influence. But the congruence in making sure that it matches, it
Yeah, makes sense.
total sense. Yeah.
That does make total sense. Question? Yeah, comment or question?
So I had the same question. So it sounded, and I might, you can clarify that for me, a one-way street. Like, for example, we can only expand where there are already current services, but it could be both ways. So in other words, we could expand service. So like in the Rivieras, we have a water district. So we have these community growth boundaries. We might have to expand our water district to add on to that. So it wouldn't be, we can never do that. It really needs to like go both ways.
Congruence,
that they
yeah.
have to, work together to make a plan.
The point of the community growth boundary amendments is to show where the community thinks is appropriate for growth in the future. It doesn't mean that the main line will be extended that way yet. It may not happen, but it's that community's vision getting passed to the special districts or any other municipal districts that are looking for modifications. The sphere of influence reviews are regular, so it's a good opportunity for those districts to take a look and see what the community has said as far as where they'd like to see growth in the future.
Any other comments from the GPAC? Yes.
Pause. The pause was use the word, shall rather than should. It does make it sound like for a community.
Oh,
we
yeah,
want
speak into the mic a little bit here. I think we're having trouble hearing you.
Does kind of sound like she was saying that if we've decided we want to expand out into this area, we can't unless there's already pre-existing capacity that can be tapped into.
That's how I heard it.
Whereas congruent would mean we can walk together, kind of a.
Would the GPAC like to see it modified to encourage collaborative? No, that's not going to work. Because the recommendation from the LAPAC is going to go to the board, and it will be the community's vision. However, perhaps it could be added as a policy that county special districts or local municipal advisory committees work with LAFCO regarding amendments to sphere of influences if necessary, so that LAFCO could hear from the community regarding any basis for their vision growing in a particular area. Yeah.
Changing the sphere of influence.
I don't.
Betsy's got her hand raised.
As it stands right now, the areas, except for the little tiny pieces in Kelseyville, I'm not sure if they're already connected or if they would require a mainline extension or a modification of a sphere of influence of water district, but Lower Lake would not.
Yeah, so it would be good to know. Let's call on Betsy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to address April's comment and Phil's affiliated comment. It doesn't restrict anything to the existing areas. It addresses the 5, 10, and 20-year long-term planning horizons, so that if we have a general plan objective of ensuring that we provide public health and safety services to the population centers that we refer to as our development groups or development boundaries, whatever we think is going to, whatever they think they're going to do in 5 years, should not prevent the expansion of the community growth boundary. It should just be congruent. You don't want to extend, development into any kind of a land use or zoned parcel for residential development, for example, if the water district is not planning on extending those water lines. If it's not, that's going to stop you from adding that potential growth section. It's intended to be mutually beneficial for all of the associated service providers.
Great. Thank you,
you.
Betsy. All right, any other questions or comments on this? I'd love to entertain a motion.
Could it read maybe that the county should encourage congruence between community growth boundary amendments and ongoing sphere of influence reviews? Would that capture what Betsy's saying? Betsy, if you want to. Then it's just one sentence that.
Yeah, Betsy, would that, let's have Maria read it again and just get Betsy to weigh in. Does this capture it?
The county should encourage congruence between the community growth boundary amendments and ongoing sphere of influence reviews.
For public health and safety services.
Got it.
Those are the minimum requirements. You cannot build an apartment building if you're not going to have water.
Thank you, Betsy.
And I do not like the word encourage. I want it to be required because it is required for major use permit approval.
So we would recommend as the GPAC that the county require, go ahead and read it again, Maria.
But if Betsy said it's already required, what are we doing?
It's required in the application for a given project, but it's not a policy.
So we're recommending a policy. Want to give it another go, Maria?
The county should encourage.
They're not counterproductive. That's all.
Okay.
The county should require congruence between the community growth boundary amendments and ongoing sphere of influence reviews for public and health safety standards.
That's it.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Got it.
We have a second. Any discussion? Any more discussion? A recommendation to the board, yeah. Any comments from the public?
Shannon Sanders, Middletown. It comes to mind that on some developments that would be within the community growth boundary, that it would be where the certain utilities, water, sewer, that it would be possible, but not necessarily be at the site, and it would be incumbent upon the developer to bring those utilities over. So I was just a little confused. I didn't know the community growth boundary could only expand where those utilities are currently.
That's not what we're saying.
Is that?
We're saying we're encouraging that it be congruent. So in
sorry,
other words,
it takes me a little while sometimes.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you.
It's okay to expand, but you need to be able to support it. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any other conversation? All right. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Avoid the conversion of agricultural lands was brought up, but
Yes.
not yet discussed.
All right, so that's sort of the big one that we've heard over and over again is the agricultural land, converting agricultural land should be discouraged. Is that? And also we had mentioned not just ag land, it was also the wetland resource conservation areas.
And I think the wording, you just have to be careful. Do we want to go on record saying no agricultural lands should ever be converted? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean that avoiding converting agricultural land
Without
should be
demonstrated significant need, or I don't know how it would do.
There's wording there that doesn't trap you into a corner where people are going to say, well, the committee said,
Well, LAFCO already says it. So and there's probably wording online somewhere that says, in the state of California, you want to avoid the conversion of ag land so that people can eat in the future. Right?
It's also a very strong theme in the agricultural element
of the general plan.
Okay, yeah.
So I think we could probably find a way to say we support that concept and just make sure the board recognizes that there's always pressure to convert ag land.
Could we use the word preserve?
Both ag and resource conservation.
They probably all should be together. You want to preserve ag lands, resource conservation, and what was the other one? Wetlands? Preserve them.
As a general policy.
Correct.
And this is actually coming from us, from all the LPACs, all the public input. I mean, it's not an isolated comment.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Is there some way to turn this into a motion so we can have a conversation about it? Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Donna.
this is Donna Mackwitz, Red Audubon.
Hi, Donna.
Could you clarify, is cannabis considered ag?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Yes, cannabis is considered an agricultural product by both Lake County and the state, which is different than an agricultural commodity.
And does cannabis have the, this is opening a can of worms, does cannabis, is it required that cannabis meet the same stringent requirements that agriculture meets?
Not at all. It's more.
More?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Donna.
Yes, Donna.
Again, I asked because when Sharon Zoller did her great presentation at the Lake County Land Trust dinner, cannabis was not mentioned in all her reports. Thank you.
I missed that one. Sorry, I was writing.
I'm sorry, say that again, Donna.
When Sharon Zoller made her presentation at a land trust dinner, she went through all of the ag products and how we've done in Lake County, but cannabis was not mentioned in her half-hour program.
Was cannabis in the ag report this year?
It's just barely starting to have some data in. It's not at the same reporting requirement level as conventional agriculture. So Sharon probably did not have access to that information.
Okay.
That's correct. It was not included. So.
Okay.
It was not excluded.
I think Catherine was talking about it getting into future crop reports, just not yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, good. We need the data. Donna, do you have any request or motion that you'd like to make?
I'll leave that up to everyone. I find our land so valuable. I hate to see any conversions, so I'll let you guys decide.
All right, Margo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not ready to make a motion yet, but I would like to add another thought as we get closer to a motion. I would suggest that we also, in addition to the sentiment of avoiding conversion of ag lands, to also steer clear of the loss of agricultural lands from production. Oh, that's kind of clunky. But in other words, there are some lands that have been, ag lands that have been rezoned, and they have not, maybe not yet have lost their ag potential. So what I'm looking at, and other people in the community are looking at, to stemming the tide that we don't lose that potential of ag lands for food production. Thank you.
Okay, so let me see if I can sum up what you're saying. You're looking not just the preservation of existing ag lands, but to ensure that if we have lands that are either currently are ag or potential for ag food production, well, there's two things. One is some ag land is not in food production.
Right.
The second thing is some land was ag, maybe it was converted, but it hasn't been developed yet. So with the first issue, if it's not in food production, one policy might be to encourage food production. So the second one, the policy would be to encourage conversion back to ag if it's still, see, that's a thornier one.
I wasn't quite getting there, but you know, we have some situations where zoning has been changed, or parcel zoning has been changed. So,
I can speak to this one actually, because this has been an ongoing discussion. There are 3 parcels next to Lamson Airport that in the 2008 general plan, their designation was changed to industrial to support development of the airport.
Mhm.
I don't know why, because I thought this was required by law, but after the 2008 general plan was adopted, there was not then a following updating of the zoning map, which it's required by law that the zoning district assigned mirrors and synchronizes.
So we're behind.
Yes, so I consider that one an error that the county has just not done, and we're in the process of getting that fixed now.
Okay.
So, because it is considered a county oversight, not a mistake.
Okay.
And so
for
in
those
that case-
those
yeah,
those
that's just a
parcels, is that
one-off.
prime ag land out that we're talking about is now industrial? Just out of curiosity.
Probably, it's a defunct walnut orchard. So, but it's right next to the airport, and so
Right.
part of the overall expansion and supporting airport supporting services,
Mhm.
I think was motivating to just changing those 3 parcels.
Back in 2008.
Correct. So it's a done deal. So I don't know. So I'm considering that a one-off.
Okay.
And so I think it would help clarify any Margot's sentence if we just don't consider that one.
Can we set that one aside, Margot?
I don't agree with the conclusion or how it's framed, but we can take it offline.
Okay. Okay. So we'll take that one offline, and we'll go back to the first point you made, which was encouraging food production.
Yes, to encourage food production. It is, as Sharon stated, we want to preserve our ag lands, those lands that are designated for agricultural uses. And those agricultural uses, to preserve that, we don't want to see that potential eroded.
Food production potential.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. All right. Any other comments? We don't have a motion on the table yet, but I'm looking for one. And we have 2 other types that we were talking about, and I'm wondering if it might be the same. Resource conservation.
So I have preserve and discourage the conversion of agricultural lands and development within resource conservation designated areas.
Okay. And
Did I miss something?
what was the wetlands?
The wetlands are already in resource conservation, so that would handle creeks, riparian areas, wetlands.
So preserve and discourage conversion of both ag lands and lands within resource conservation areas.
Actually, I'd take out preserve, because if you discourage the conversion of ag lands and discourage the development within resource conservation, you are in fact preserving them.
Right. Do you want to read something that would work then?
Discourage the conversion of agricultural lands and development within resource conservation designated areas.
Okay, that's almost sounding like a motion. Does it?
So
Does anyone want? Did you make that motion? Yes. Okay. We have a motion.
At the first, could you say? You say conversion twice. At the first you say preserve? Say it one more time.
Discourage the conversion of agricultural lands and development within resource conservation designated areas. So it's it's after 5. It's hard to make complete sentences. Conversion is used first, and then conservation is actually a term, land use designation, resource conservation.
Okay.
So that'll be capitalized to help also differentiate the 2.
All right. So that is a motion. Do we have a second to that motion before we have conversation?
Okay, I'll second.
You'll second. Okay, let's open it for conversation. From the GPAC first.
So, Maria, how does that work with the designation of prime ag lands? Hasn't that been talked about in the cannabis committee? And are we talking about the same stuff, same land?
This would apply to any land with a general plan land use designation of agriculture.
Okay. Thank you.
Keep in mind, this is different than where you typically will always find agriculture. You can have walnut trees on rural lands. You know, prime ag uses are allowed in rural lands, rural residential,
Right.
and suburban reserve. And so within the ag. So the agriculture designation is typically reserved for areas with prime ag soils. That's the first 4 classes of soils. Low slopes. There's one other thing that I forget, but so those are preserved ag. Typically, the areas that you really want to preserve because they're the prime ag soils are going to have the agricultural designation.
And so you're telling me that it also covers other areas, maybe hillsides where you may have a walnut orchard that may not be prime ag land. I'm just
saying that
confused
this
on the
as it is written now, it does not affect rural lands or rural residential, because we're talking about general plan land use designations, and those are different than agriculture land use designation.
So another policy might be to encourage the preservation of open lands, right?
That's a whole different ballgame.
That's a whole different ball. We can talk about that
'cause
later.
that now gets into all kinds of really cool stuff like floodplain management.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, what we didn't do is we didn't talk about local food production in this particular motion, which we can take up as something separate, I suppose. So let's just look at this motion: discourage the conversion of agricultural lands. Is that what it says? And discourage the development within resource conservation areas. All right, we have a motion and a second to that. So any other conversation from the GPAC?
Madam
Donna?
Chair, this is Donna.
Yeah.
May I have the definition of resource conservation, and would that include serpentine and chaparral? Thank you. And old oak growth.
No. Oak groves are not designated resource conservation. Serpentine areas are not designated. We use a different map to determine where those are located. And chaparral is everywhere. So
Yeah,
no.
so we would need a different policy motion or suggestion for those areas, Donna. That could be the next conversation.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other hands raised? No. Wes, we'll open it to the public for comment.
Thank you. The words by the member over here to not let that ag land get converted got kind of watered down when it turned into discourage. There's a big difference between saying we're not going to do this, and especially I wasn't aware that there was a designation of prime versus, you know, a walnut orchard somewhere. I thought it was all ag myself. I'm not that versed on it all, but to go from to say that this is going to apply to prime or to ag, which is prime, and we're going to discourage it. It's like, oh no, don't do that. But oh well, okay.
So what, do you have a suggestion?
My suggestion is to go back with your original wording that you had said, that preserve, yeah.
Or avoid conversion?
Well, even avoid is you can mitigate avoidance. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But this being especially I thought the words were pretty hard on some things, but you know, like the walnut orchard, but when it's a prime ag, if that's what the ag means, we've got the ag commissioner here. You know, if you needed a better definition of it, I think you should go. We should stay with the stronger wording, and it's sad to see though. You know, coming here from Lower Lake on 20. Right outside of Lower Lake, they're following another walnut orchard's going to the chainsaw, and it's a 13-acre for sale sign on it.
That's because walnuts are selling for 39 cents.
Yeah, yeah, but what's that going to be? You know, what are they trying to sell it for? And then behind my house, there's 100 acres out there that the gentleman has up for sale for, I think it's $1.5 million or something like that. But he has right in his ad that he's got it up for sale. It says, the county will work with you on rezoning this.
Interesting.
That's what it says. You know?
Interesting.
That's his problem. That's his words, you know. He might not be disclosing the truth, but just hate to see all that stuff go.
Yeah, we're going to be happy to have those nuts in.
So,
thank you.
may I amend my second? I really would like preserve put back in there.
Okay,
if-
so read,
if I
can
may.
somebody read to me what you would approve as a second?
Just in the beginning where you said,
Preserve agricultural,
okay,
we'll make sure the first motion agrees with you.
Preserve agricultural lands, comma, and discourage development within resource conservation designated areas.
How's that?
yeah, I'm happy with that. With resource conservation folks, are they happy with discourage, or just would you say preserve and list the two?
Can we just change it to preserve
This is Donna.
agricultural
I
lands and
think
resource
preserve.
conservation designated areas?
That sounds like a good motion.
I would like to amend my second if whoever first did it would.
Okay.
Are we good?
We have a motion and a second. Any other conversation?
Well, again, just to make sure, I mean, the devil's in the details. Does preserve mean that we're saying that all existing ag land in Lake County shall never be converted to anything else? Is that what preserve means?
We're
Because
encouraging
someone
the
be able to
board.
come back on you when you do change a bit of it and say, oh, you're not preserving.
Mhm.
See, that's my fear. You don't want to back yourself into a legal corner where,
I've never.
you know,
I
And
honestly
always-
think the Board of Supervisors is very well aware of this issue. And if
Yeah.
we say preserve ag land and they do it, that will be a statement they're making.
And Maria, may I ask you that someone could come and petition the Planning Commission for a change in designation. Is that correct?
We do have projects for general plan amendments as well as rezones.
That's right.
So,
However, the department would not support anyone trying to rezone an area that is wetland or resource
That's already
conservation.
true.
Yeah, that's we just wouldn't even.
We're just, I mean, we're putting an exclamation point on this, but this is already
But
true.
You're expressing a priority to the board.
Yeah, this is already something that
okay.
Yeah.
people have to go through
Not
if they
gonna
want to
be
convert
shocking
ag land. Okay.
them. Yeah.
All right. Any other board? Okay. Come on up. Members of the public?
Hi, Julia Kerr, Upper Lake. I'm just confused, and maybe it's after 5, and that's why. But we have different ag designations, and in those different ag designations, there's ag preserve, there's prime ag, and then there's different levels of soils in those ags. And then we have a chart, I think it's called Appendix A, that allows energy projects, distilleries on prime ag land, on ag preserve land, and how does this align with that? I like the idea that none of that would be allowed. We have a food security issue worldwide that we need to seriously consider and put policies in place to make sure that we feed our community.
I might be
so-
able to provide a little background on this because I remember when this came to the Board of Supervisors, and when it did, there were petitions to allow some commercial uses on ag land, like tasting rooms and things like that. And I think the Farm Bureau wanted a certain square footage. The board at the time doubled that square footage and was allowing commercial uses because they were trying to encourage local economy. And I personally voted against that because of the ag issue that we're now facing, which is food production for the future. And I think some ag lands took advantage of that, but not a lot. I don't think you saw a lot of commercial development on ag land here. But it was kind of a statement made by the board, which is why you're seeing it in some of those documents.
Well,
the board
and-
can
and-
make a
and
different
it's more
statement.
than tasting rooms.
No, they were saying ag-related commercial usage, and they
Which
had
includes energy facilities, which I just.
yeah, at the time they didn't, but I don't know what happened after that. So
It's happening now.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how this motion would affect those commercial uses on ag lands.
So I'll try to answer that, and you can tell me if I'm correct. We are making a recommendation to the board that they come up with new policies, And we're saying one of the things that we suggest is the preservation of ag land for lots of reasons, including local food security. The board will then decide whether it needs to amend any of its past practices or if it's fine with the way things are.
Thank you. I'm clear. I appreciate that.
Was that right, Maria? Do you have any
I
corrections?
think she makes a pretty good point in that this this recommendation is rather ambiguous. Preserving agriculture, I don't, if I were just looking at this, I would not necessarily know what that means. Preserve agriculture for local food production says more. However, there are a number of accessory uses allowed on agricultural lands that support the ag industry. And so that's why wineries were allowed there, and is to sort of stretch out the amount of use we get out of our ag and not just being a resource extraction parcel. So I would recommend that if the GPAC has something specific in mind regarding the preservation of agriculture, that maybe we flesh that out a little bit.
Okay, so
Madam Chair, I would like to amend my motion to include preserve agriculture for food production and resource conservation land use designation areas.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Second. Are we up for discussion?
Yes.
So I have a high level of ignorance on all of this. I'm not a part of growing anything, but my restaurant uses, a lot of produce and all of that. What I feel like, isn't there already a really high bar just naturally to, if somebody wants to convert ag land to something that's not ag, isn't that like already almost an act of God?
Go ahead.
Oh, I just think that our statement is in support of
that bar.
Of that bar, that we're just reiterating it as having input from all around the lake, and just reiterating it towards the Board of Supervisors to, as they move forward in any decision making, that's a filter for that.
And I just want to, I really have a problem with absolutist statements, because it can lock you into something. For instance, I assume that everyone realizes that if we maintain agriculture as our primary use of land in Lake County, okay, that will preclude any substantial economic growth. It
I
just does.
disagree with that.
Oh,
I completely disagree with that.
You take the huge wineries out here, huge. I mean, you drive over the first set of hills there, it's all vineyard, as far as, which I love, by the way. I have a little vineyard myself. But the economic, benefit from a vineyard is, first of all, in terms of employees, you've got the owner, okay, who hires temporary help or, and so forth. And you've got some seasonal employment there. And he or she sells their product if the market's up. Right now, it's down 20% for the vineyard, so they can't even sell their grapes. That the economic, in terms of taxes, of course, ag land is not taxed anywhere near, commercial or residential level. Counties that remained essentially 80 or 90% agriculture, 20 years from now, we can still be the third poorest county in California. Now to me personally, that's okay. See,
but we'll have food.
I already got mine, and I'm retired, and I love living here, and I love the fact there are no factories and no businesses to, and so forth. That's just great. No noise, no pollution. Who wouldn't want to live here? But I just think people should understand that when you make decisions, same thing about tourism. if an area bases its economy on tourism, that's very dangerous economically, because it's so volatile, so unpredictable, that any economics report you want to read on economic will tell you that depending on tourism is not a good thing. You know, so that's why I fear absolute statements like we're not going to convert. So if some clean industry, you know, comes in, you know, a Tesla or I don't
And they want to convert ag land?
and they want to convert ag
And
land.
they can't find an industrial parcel in all of Lake County?
Well, I don't know.
See, that's my point.
I don't know.
I believe we have enough land for residential development with infill and everything else, so we don't need subdivisions developed on ag land. We also have, if you look at it, we have industrial parcels. We are having a conversation about one of them right now that has never been developed industrially, but is still available industrially.
And that should be part of our report. Right, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Because that gives people the context of why you say you favor this. Because when you just say that, it sounds like you want to do this to the exclusion of any other possible future, you know, for the county.
Okay, I understand,
you know.
Phil. And I guess my comment would be, I do understand that, but I also know that we have a mandate from the people who have filled out the surveys and attended the meetings
bet.
and said they want to keep the rural character of this place.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so I agree with Phil too. There's also in the surveys that we want more opportunities economically for jobs. So you're saying they both can coexist, and that's something, again, I think that the three of us can't picture because we don't have that information.
We don't have the map yet.
Right, right.
Okay. Fair enough.
I would just say that one does not preclude the other.
That's right.
And the population that produces your food is 1% of the population. And what we want to do is make sure that we have a safe, sustainable food supply that we, and I say we, I mean the United States, are in charge of. And to preserve that ag land doesn't preclude having any of these other things in Lake County.
Okay.
But to make that statement, we want to remind those folks who just aren't aware of how that delicious dinner gets put on that table there in the saw shop. Yeah. So I think it's a reminder. It's not an exclusionary comment.
Margot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to your point, Weston, and to Sharon's, I'm sorry, to Phil's point, it's not so much being an absolutist, but it's our sending a message into the future. So future boards of supervisors can have the backbone and the public support to withstand. There is going to be incredible pressure to sell off ag lands, to convert in the future. If not right now, because a lot of landowners, they're hard pressed because they're not making a good living off of walnuts, pears, etc. So this is our effort to show support for future generations of Lake County residents and our leaders, so they can have the gumption to say, no, this is a value. This is a value, and we want to stand by our ag lands. Thank you.
All right. Yes.
And I agree with all that, and I look to be educated. Like, it's what I'm curious of is one. So I firmly believe, like, ag land for food. I think that is vital. How much of our ag land is currently used for food? How many gardens are?
There's a report you can look that. There's
good.
actually an ag report.
Good.
It doesn't include cannabis.
But
apparently.
is it? And what's that percentage? Like, is it yes?
Part of our discussion part of our discussion in the Lower Lake action was the commercial designated areas that are currently bare land. So the Tesla could come and build on those industrial commercial areas that currently stand vacant. There was more of those than there was housing in the Lower Lake area. So and you're right, we need to make that more apparent, that those are available. And again, this is a recommendation, not a rule. We don't have that power.
Exactly.
So we're talking about taking the recommendation before us and couching it in the context so that the readers, or future board of supervisors or citizens, read it within a context. That we're not saying that
Target can't
we
come
want,
in.
that we're happy with being the third poorest. You know, we have, people talk to me about.
Right, and
the
I
fact that we
think
have
there's
2 sheriff's
legitimate
deputies.
disagreement that converting ag land is required for economic growth. I mean, that's where you and I have
Right.
disagreement,
Well,
because I
people
think we
com-
have plenty of
People
zone
complain
par-
to me about the fact that, do you know, Phil, that there are 2 deputy sheriffs on duty all night in Lake County? And you go, oh my God, how could that be? Because we can't afford a 3rd deputy. That's why. So where do we get the money for the 3rd deputy? I mean, the economic issues are real issues to people. They're safety and security issues, and people, I don't know, I feel like they want both.
Well, I think they do, and
a job, and I want a job too.
they do want
both
economic opportunity, yeah. And I guess you're hearing pushback because it doesn't, one does not preclude the other. You can have ag and you can have industrial and commercial development, and there's plenty of parcels zoned for that.
And this is a great discussion, by the
Okay.
way. And we need to present our recommendations in that way.
Incoherent, yeah.
In a contextual way, so people understand we're not talking about one excluding the other.
Exactly, okay.
I'll let us move on. I just have one closing, which is that I think, you know, we have currently, right, I mean, walnut orchards being ripped out left and right. I know that,
That's the price of walnuts right there.
now I just lost his name. And Beckstoffer, I know that he's ripping out acres and acres of grapes right now. And so I think that the conversation for the county, as you know, preserving ag, but it is how do we encourage and make it more profitable and sustainable for farmers to be able to grow food. I mean, that is the crux of the conversation that we're having, which is food resources, and how do we make that more profitable and sustainable.
Got it, thank you. All right. Monica, and then we'll go to Wes. No hand up? Okay, Wes.
Yes, and again, I'm up here lobbying about the preserve. And because all we were talking about is preserving the zoning of the land of the prime. We're not talking about the hillsides where they grow grapes. Yeah, you could call grape a food if you want, but where they grow grapes up there in all that andesite, and the only thing that'll grow up there is grapes or manzanita. You're not going to grow vegetables. There ain't no way, no how is a vegetable farm ever going to be on a lot of this land that's out here. Where the walnuts were, you're not going to grow vegetables there for probably 5 years because of the acid that's in the walnut. It's just not going to grow. They won't grow underneath those trees. But the flat land, which is the prime ag land, there is walnuts growing on some of those. You know, there's stuff like that out there. We need to preserve that land. That's the land that needs to be preserved.
Thank you.
And that's where the food's going to come from. And you guys don't all have to agree to vote on this. You know, it doesn't have to be everybody in agreement. And I would like to see you guys vote on this to use the word preserve.
Thank you. Thank you, Wes. All right, any other comments from the public?
Yes, can you hear me?
We have Monica now. Hi, Monica.
Hi, thank you. And again, maybe it's because it's after 5, but I am totally lost in this conversation in regard to agriculture, because it sounds like we've now taken agriculture and brought it down to ag being equal to just food production. I want to go back to a couple comments that Maria said, that again, there are certain parcels that are zoned ag, and then there are other parcels that have ag on them, but are not necessarily zoned ag. So to Weston's comments about Beckstoffer's property and walnuts that are coming out, a lot of those, or many of those also, may be on rural lands rather than on actual agricultural lands. And of course, for food production, you have different soils going back to the 4 maps of soils that we have. Some are prime soils that are really, really great for food production, but other soils are good for production of other ag products. The soil that I am currently in ag, I grow grapes. I'm on an agricultural parcel, but my agricultural parcel would suck for producing food. It does very well for producing, it's a rocky riverbed soil, volcanic. It does really great for producing wonderful Cabernet and Cabernet Franc, but not tomatoes.
Monica, do you have a suggestion for the GPAC's recommendation?
Yes, to focus on ag as agricultural parcels that may produce food, grapes, walnuts, or other ag products, including cannabis, which again, cannabis is not by itself a particular land use designation, it is a product. So that we focus on agricultural generally as a whole. Focusing on food production is on certain prime ag soils, not necessarily on all.
Got it.
So I guess I would just like to kind of bring this group. I would hate to see only the preservation of ag for food when we have other agricultural products over the years, and they do change over time. So we don't want to eliminate other agricultural products that have great economic impact, regardless of what Phil says, because I'm also going to suggest that you look to Sonoma and Napa that are big in wine and grapes and are doing wonderfully economically. So I'll close with that.
Thanks,
Thank
Monica.
you.
Can I get somebody to summarize the current motion on the table? You wrote it down.
Preserve agriculture land use designation areas for food production and resource conservation land use designated areas.
Do we want to eliminate the food?
Primarily for? I just,
One thing you
It's
might
your
wanna
motion. You can
also
say-
know is the board doesn't have any purview over what gets grown on agricultural
Exactly.
land. So to tell them that you want it for local food production is going to be problematic because they have no authority.
Yeah,
for that.
there's
we have no nexus to require.
So
it,
if we
except
drop
for
that
cannabis.
phrase, it would say preserve.
Preserve agriculture and resource conservation land use designated areas.
Okay. All right.
I'd just like to say that this is the richness of democracy, where we look at things and we're really uneducated and prepared to. You're not drafting a law. You're an advisory committee. I'm fully in support of that. You're just suggesting to the board, this is what these people said to us.
Got it.
You're not making a law.
Thank
so
you.
I think you can move on from my perspective.
As chair, I would like to do that.
Can I call the question?
Yes. So any other urgent comments? Okay, let's bring it back. Let's state the motion as you would like it to be, for the person who made the motion.
Preserve agriculture and resource conservation land use designated areas.
Got it. Is the second agree?
I'm gonna say that I would like to see for food production in there somewhere.
Do you want to say primarily for food?
Food production.
Okay. Read what you want the motion to be. It's your motion.
Preserve agriculture.
It would be preserve agriculture land use designated areas for local.
Primarily for. Okay. Read me the motion. primarily, yeah. We've talked about this now for
And you want
almost a
local
half
food
an hour.
production. You want stuff that we're gonna grow here and eat locally,
Mm-mm.
not walnuts
Mm-mm.
or
Not
grapes.
local. No.
No, we don't have to go, let's not go there yet. I think once we get hungry, we'll make it primarily local.
Or food production.
And again, pardon my anal retentiveness for words.
Well, you need to talk to the person making the motion.
Okay, so what's food?
Yeah.
Are grapes food?
Yes.
When I go eat at Sasha, I like a nice bottle.
Me too.
Okay, so please read me the motion.
I'll be like the cab she made.
Preserve agricultural land use development.
I'm sorry.
Preserve agriculture. I have never had someone tell me they can't hear me. Sorry. Norm can hear me across the highway. Preserve agricultural land use designation areas primarily for food production and preserve resource conservation land use designation areas.
That's the motion. Does the second agree?
Yes. Now, I don't want to open up anything else. When you say, what is not, if you're using it for growing stuff, what is not for food production? What is not food production?
Cannabis.
Pot.
It's a consumable like wine.
Yeah.
Okay,
and I
people
don't
do
wanna
eat
get-
it, I
get
guess,
into-
yeah.
in that. Okay.
But again, this is just a recommendation
Okay.
for one
Correct.
small piece.
Let's move,
Right,
so
yes.
as chair, let's just say that we're running out of time here.
Okay.
So let's take the question as it is.
Yes.
We've had enough conversation, I do believe, unless there's something urgent you need to say.
You can object or
All right.
abstain or.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would
All
just
right.
like to make a post comment,
Yep.
which is, and I'm.
Move the
this
mic
will- This
towards
is in the future when we get down to editing this report that we're going to do, this great report, is that we preface this with a statement about that Lake County has enough land to preserve a variety of uses, including, industrial, residential,
Right.
recreational,
Okay.
and agricultural. It's just that we would like the existing agricultural land to be preserved and those other activities to go on
Fair
other
enough.
land. But without that context, you get into this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Are there any more open questions? I'll turn it to the GPAC of things that we've talked about that we felt needed a conversation and a recommendation.
I have a clarifying question.
Yes.
So we started the agenda saying that we were going to talk about mapping amendments. We talked about housing and walkable neighborhoods to amenities. We talked about community growth boundaries and our LAPAC comments. So our discussion today has seemed to me to be a little more broad. This isn't confining down to the LAPACs where they wanted to do different kinds of zoning, right?
The GPAC recommendations are not intended to affect LAPAC recommendations.
Perfect, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Yes.
Was not there one or two that we were going to consider later?
Of the LAPAC recommendations?
Yes.
That was all discussion prior to deciding you wanted a bird's eye view, kind of holistic,
But
county-wide.
there was one particular piece of property in, or a recommendation in the Kelseyville that we were going to go back because we deferred.
That was the ag land piece?
The ag land piece, that we deferred the decision.
I think that is actually covered in this last recommendation
Okay.
as a county-wide priority.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
I would agree. All right. Are we done?
Unless
Yes,
y'all have
Margot.
more. And then we have one last slide for next steps, just so you kind of have an idea of where we're going from here.
Okay.
Since this is probably the last meeting we'll have before drafting begins on the general plan, I wanted to bring to GPAC's attention a suggestion from Betsy Kahn and some other GPAC members, is that we build into the general plan the language and the expectation that there'll be checkpoints, progress reports at regular intervals to the Board of Supervisors. So we should plant that seed now as the drafts, start churning, coming out. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not clear on what that meant. Could you, it's after 5.
Okay, so we're coming up with great ideas, great recommendations, but this is all going to be a paperweight unless it gets converted into an implementation plan with milestones, target dates, a responsible party, responsible person, and regular reports to the Board of Supervisors. So that's what we want to bake in.
You mean after the general plan is approved?
Correct.
Yeah,
But
those are all actually part of each element in the general plan. It identifies implementations, which is how we're going to roll out what the priorities are, as well as assigning responsible departments, general timelines, like this year, 2 to 5, that kind of a thing.
Right, and I've read our current general plan and the local area plans, and they have great ideas, but as far as implementation plans, they are lacking because they don't have target dates, and so it's very easy for them to be forgotten.
Or even if they did, they were not.
So if the GPAC would like to add a priority that implementation plans in Lake County 2050 include responsible departments and identified timelines, that could be a
recommendation
sure.
we would make.
Yeah.
Very good.
Do you want to do that today, or you want to wait until we start going? We're going to have many.
We're
2
having
at least.
2 more official meetings, but we seem to have multiple sessions of each.
And when we have a meeting, it turns into 2 meetings.
Part A and Part
So that's 4 meetings.
Part C and D.
You're
Kelly's
willing to
camp
wait
is
on
not
that?
part of tonight's
I
discussion.
can wait on that too,
but I'll call.
wordsmith that one.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. Okay. Next steps then? Everybody good with this? All right.
Is that a Tanya thing? Are we handing that over to you? Oh, wait, did we want to take action on that or talk about it later? I missed.
We said we would talk about it.
Oh, great. When we do like policy.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy to share an overview here of next steps. The immediate next step is that the Board of Supervisors will be meeting, discussing the general plan at their meeting on March 11th. They'll be looking at the LAPAC recommendations on the land use map and boundary changes along with these recommendations from the GPAC. And then in the longer term, we are working on preparing the draft general plan. We're in that phase of the project. And so that work the preparation of the draft general plan will extend through this coming winter. We'll also be concurrently working on the environmental impact report, with that being, our work on the draft general plan goes through the fall. The environmental impact report analysis goes through the winter, and that all is leading up to public review of the draft general plan and environmental impact report starting in the spring, and going and with an adoption anticipated in fall of next year. And this just shows the full list of meetings as they had been, anticipated for the GPAC at the start of the project. So those last 2 meetings that we are planning are to review the countywide elements in one meeting and the planning area elements in another meeting. And those would happen after the draft general plan is released in the kind of winter, spring timeframe.
Great. Does that tower still exist, that picture?
Oh, no.
No? Okay. Sorry.
But also one last detail, you had a question for the group of, or maybe Phil did, where the 2 LAPACs disagree on planning area boundaries. Does the GPAC want to review and actually take positions on them? Before I erase this from my list, I just needed to know.
I think, did we want to take a position where LAPEX disagree, or would leave that to the board?
Flip a coin? Why no?
No, up on the screen, please. And then additionally, you had mentioned possibly scheduling another GPAC meeting for topics yet to be identified. And I just wanted you to see that again and tell, just because I'm going to put it on our next team meeting to sort of
I think
figure out a
countywide
timeline.
elements and planning area elements are sufficient. When I'm realizing that one meeting sometimes ends up being 2 or 3,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay,
I don't
great.
need to add a
This is
topic.
good because the countywide elements and planning area elements are going to be spots where we can get that more concrete assignment of responsible departments and timelines. Because I
Right.
agree, what's the use of a implementation that doesn't tell you who's going to do it or when? You know, that's the things that I would shove way towards the future when I have time.
Yeah.
So that's a good idea.
Unless your name's on the list for
Unless
solving
unless
that.
it's stuck with me.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, good. Any comments on next steps? Yes.
I'm sorry to bring this up, but when
be
I
sorry.
when I agreed to take one of the concerns off the table for now, I didn't know there was going to be a report to Board of Supervisors on March 11th.
Mhm.
That doesn't give a lot of time for a resolution of my concern. So
Do you want to bring it up now and see if we can solve it?
yeah, or at least get some high-level agreement on next steps. So here's my concern. There is a suspected error from the general plan update in 2008 where lands that are currently zoned as agriculture were supposedly rezoned to industrial, right? So this is 2000.
Their
in
land use
2008.
designation was changed. Yeah, they weren't rezoned.
Right, but, you know, now I'm saying, well, it's still zone ag. Maybe that doesn't make sense to change that designation, and we as GPAC take another look at that. I took a look at what's in our the local area plan for Kelseyville, and there are a number of policy issues and criteria that that change violates, and it doesn't make sense. Also, there's a curious note for those 3 parcels that are next to Lamson Field, and it says that, well, this is non-residential. These are non-residential parcels, but it might be a good candidate for housing. And it's like, wait a minute, these are supposedly zoned industrial. How do we get from industrial to residential?
Let me ask Maria a question. Can we take this, I mean, I'm sort of at the point where I'm not sure I'm focused on it anymore. Can we take this off the Board of Supervisors radar for the March 11th meeting so the GPAC has an opportunity to, if there is any reason to weigh in on this?
It's not going before the board. It's
Okay.
considered a 2008 general plan decision and an error that it has not been rezoned to this point.
So it's not going to the board on March 11th?
Correct. It is not part of Lake County 2050. It's considered part of the approved 2008 general plan.
Okay. So it sounds like you're wanting it to be corrected in Lake County 2050?
To correct it would be to rezone it to industrial, as far as the department position is, because it is actually against state law that it has not been rezoned to this date.
Okay, so there's a problem.
Okay, well, just to be thorough, it would be helpful to see that documentation that led to that decision that it would be zoned or rezoned to industrial, what the rationale was.
I would be opposed to using meeting time to do that. It's too small an issue. We're not an investigative body or an authoritative body.
Yeah, turn on your mic. And
Sorry.
It sounds like we could take it as an issue of concern of one of the GPAC members.
Off record.
Take it offline
Mhm.
and get the documentation or whatever.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there may be a county mistake. So
The county mistake is not to rezone it. Well, as far as I understand, but I'd be happy to see if we can find a staff report.
yeah, what
I'm
was
not even sure if
what-
it exists.
I do remember the 2008 general plan was a lot like this, where there was a lot of conversation.
Right. Right.
And this one sounds like the decision was made somewhere along the way.
Right. So I
but
don't
it-
know that this GPAC has the authority to reconsider an approved decision.
Right. So we just need to see that the decision was made.
And I'll be happy to take a look and see if I can find that. Maybe it would be. It's not going to be in CDD. I don't have that good of a bookkeeping history going back that far. But administrative office will have the agenda packet. So that
We could probably even watch the movie if we wanted.
Margot can.
Another way to look at this situation is that requests are coming to various county entities, and they're coming to GPAC for consideration. These are requests to changes. So just as that request that didn't get processed fully, it could be another request to say, well, you didn't get rezoned industrial as it was supposedly approved at one time. Well, what about another request to have it rezoned ag?
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, okay. Requests come to.
No, this is a place where lots of people want their land use changed. We know.
Actually, it goes to the LAPAC.
Yeah, that goes to the
So an
LAPAC.
individual parcel land use designation amendment should go to the LAPAC
Okay, not here.
for their
Okay.
consideration and then referral on for informational.
Got it.
purposes only
But
to the
your
GPAC.
point too was this is not going before the board on March 11th.
No, it's considered part of the 2008 general plan.
Got it. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Does that satisfy you for now? We can.
For now, thank
we,
you.
We have to do a little research. I'm not gonna. I would say you, not me.
Uh-huh.
One of us is going to have to do some research. All right. With that, anything else, Maria, before I adjourn the meeting?
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Meeting is adjourned. The two-part meeting is adjourned.
Yeah. Session 2.
Thank you, everybody. I understand. Yeah, fine.
Michelle.
We need them to tell us what day the decision is made. And then you can find what the outcome was. Well, it sounds like a big mistake.